So again, welcome to the reading of Chapter 5, Diving Deeper. So let's just arrive and settle in. Okay, thank you. So, Chapter 5, Diving Deeper. Spring and Summer 2005. And we start with a quote from the Course. All that is asked of you is to make room for truth. You are not asked to make or do what lies beyond your understanding. All you are asked to do is let it in. Recognition of the Spirit. David and I continued our journey north to Ottawa, Canada, to visit his friend Maureen and hold several gatherings. Arriving at her house, Maureen opened the door to greet us. When our eyes met, I felt an immediate recognition and familiarity. It felt like meeting a sister, and I was absolutely delighted. Her eyes lit up, and she exclaimed, "Oh, you're a female David." Later she told me that it was as if a small female version of David had come to her front door. She knew immediately that she could trust me and that she would be bearing her soul to me. She had hesitated to share some things with David because he was a man, but feeling the same presence in my female form felt very safe and comforting to her. This kind of encounter, where I was recognized as a miracle worker and immediately trusted, felt like a beautiful confirmation of the truth of who I was. Although David always shared my learning and healing experiences with respect, I was mostly aware of my egoic thoughts and patterns. Meeting Maureen strengthened my sense of worthiness and made me feel even closer to David. Later, I read in the Manual for Teachers, how many teachers of God are needed to save the world? The teachers of God are one. This body is the medium through which God's voice can communicate with those who do not realize they are spirit. This body they can see. This voice they understand without fear. Therefore, the truth is welcomed through this form. A very dark moment. During our 3-day drive back to the Peace House, I noticed feelings of pride and an annoyance with David arising. I wanted to take a leisurely drive, walks in nature, and generally do things differently to David. Arriving back at the Peace House, We unpacked the car, and David went straight into his function of answering emails. As I sat in the sanctuary, I felt a darkness arising in my mind. I felt trapped. Over the previous months, many of the ego's plan Bs for a different life had been exposed and shared with David, and I knew that there was no going back. I wanted to be free, but when the familiar "I want to be elsewhere" thoughts arose, I felt a grating hatred that I had no choice. I felt controlled and held against my will. Taking walks was no longer an avenue of escape, and a dark, empty feeling of horror was rising from somewhere deep within the recesses of my mind. Right on cue, David came downstairs and began talking to me incessantly. Unable to hear him and wanting to get away, I said I was going for a walk. He continued to look straight at me, talking. I felt trapped. I insisted I was going for a walk, and he simply continued talking. I walked out and put my shoes on. He followed me out the door, still talking. I couldn't really hear what he was saying as we walked down the street. I thought he was crazy, and that anyone who saw us would think so too. He was talking on and on to me about purpose and commitment and guidance, and it wasn't making any sense. The voice in my own mind was much louder. My anger at this crazy guy and this crazy life blocked out everything he was saying. Arriving back at the Peace House, he continued following me. Contained now within the safety of the sanctuary, dark feelings arose within me. I looked at David and was terrified when I thought I saw little horns coming up from his forehead. Oh my God. He continued talking as if holding me still by his very presence. I had no idea what he was saying, but somehow I was able to stay in the room. Fear arose and consumed me, but within seconds it broke. When I looked again at David, he was pure innocence. His beautiful blue eyes were holding me with the love and kindness of Christ. I could breathe and realized for a second that I knew all of this was a deep experience of healing within my mind. Nothing was what it seemed. The darkness rose again. Once more, my perception of David shifted from love to fear. David stayed with me until the horrible feeling vanished. His talking slowed, and his voice quieted until again I could see he was the presence of love. And then it was over. I wondered how David had known to come downstairs at that very moment, how he'd known what to do and how to help me. I couldn't believe how deeply held and loved I was by a presence and awareness that was far beyond what I could understand. My faith was again restored, and my trust deepened beyond measure. I saw everything so clearly after that experience. I realized that the ego's tricks of wanting personal freedom and having escape plans were all a way of keeping me stuck. It was the exact opposite of the truth. And now I had fallen into true freedom, being held in God's love, free from the gnawing discontent of the ego. Oh, what amazing grace. What gratitude I had for David's devotion. Nothing fits. I began to feel that my clothes didn't suit me anymore, and I didn't know what to wear because I'd bought my clothes based on judgments about the image I'd wanted to portray at the time. I didn't feel like that same person now, and I felt guilty wearing clothes that reminded me of my old motivations. Now I wanted to be spiritual and not care, but secretly I did. David always talked about everything being provided by the Holy Spirit, including clothes. However, I still wanted some control over what I looked like, even though I felt impotent about the situation. I had felt the strain of caring but not wanting to care for some time. I tried to go shopping and buy clothes a couple of times, but since I didn't know what to buy because my mind was unclear, it simply hadn't worked. Nothing seemed to fit. I finally admitted to the Spirit that I didn't know my own best interests in this department and gave the area over to Him to guide. Over the following months, I watched as my wardrobe was slowly replaced by clothes that were given to me. Everything that was offered fit perfectly, and because it was given freely to me with love, I had no judgment about it at all. Each time I was offered a gift of clothing, I was filled with love and gratitude. I was beginning to experience divine providence. It was so gentle and loving to simply receive what the Spirit wanted to give me rather than try to get something for myself. One afternoon, I had the thought of needing a thin fleece, since the ones I had were too heavy to wear inside. An hour later, our friend Pam called to say that she had a couple of thin fleece sweaters she thought I might like. We were both delighted to experience divine providence together, and she was just as thrilled as I was to see how she was being used by the Spirit through listening to guidance. Over the next 2 years, Pam found herself out shopping several times, buying items of clothing that were exactly what I needed, right down to a bikini top to match some bottoms that I had. We were amazed every time at how taken care of we are by the Spirit. Sam the cat. A question had been arising in my mind about how to be. I sat and pondered, if everything is an illusion, including the people, then what does it mean to be loving towards another person? What would David do if a child or an animal needed help in the moment? I could feel the fear in my stomach of not knowing. Would he just stand by and do nothing, since it's all an illusion? I prayed that I would be shown the answer. The following day, as we pulled into our driveway after running errands, Sam, the big white cat from next door, was there to greet us, meowing loudly. He was super affectionate as we got out of the car, giving us very loving looks all the way down the front path. The following day, the exact same thing happened. Tripod liked to sit at the front door, gazing from the window panes that came right down to her level. She perched on her back legs like a squirrel, her front paw resting on the windowsill as she watched the birds and enjoyed the sun. Suddenly, Sam appeared at the window pane right in front of her. She began to whimper and then whine. The sound increased in volume until it resembled an air raid siren. Sam continued to be super friendly to us for the next few days and upset Tripod numerous times by coming up her front steps and looking in her door. After seeing boxes on the veranda at Sam's house, I asked his owner if they were moving. He said that they were, and that they were all ready to go, except that they didn't know what to do with Sam. Oh, he's taken care of that. He's been telling us all week that he's moving in with us, I said with a laugh. On the day that the neighbours moved out, Sam was ready and eager to come inside the peace house. He skipped in, weaving around David's legs. Tripod, her fur standing on end, went off like a siren again. This time the sound was interspersed with growls. She looked traumatized. Her eyes were huge, and no matter how loudly she wailed, this huge intruder was not leaving her house. Tripod's sister, Angel, came running into the kitchen and joined in, wailing and hissing at Sam. Sam froze, with his front paw in midair, a bewildered look on his face. After all, he was simply following his guidance. David scooped Sam up, and he was instantly off Tripod's intruder alert radar. The kitty siren stopped immediately, and everyone relaxed. A few minutes later, David put Sam down on the kitchen floor, and the siren started again. David moved swiftly, and with no apparent emotional concern. He didn't show any false empathy for the animals, and he wasn't trying to control or protect them. He scooped Sam up and set him down a few more times, and then gently placed him on a kitchen chair. Soon Tripod dashed out of the kitchen and back upstairs to David's room. Sam had learned that it was much quieter when he was up high, and so he moved about on the top of the furniture throughout the following month, while Tripod's reactions to his presence gradually softened. Here was the answer to my question. The intervention had been handled with certainty and kindness. David had acted in a way that was truly most helpful for all. Okay. Sharing my journals worldwide. During various travels with David, people had expressed to me, "It must be so much easier for you than it is for us, Kirsten, because you're with David." I knew that in one way it was, and on the other hand, they didn't have a clue how intense it was and what I was going through just by being in his presence. Imagine being with a very clear mirror, and you have asked for all of your unconscious darkness to come up, to be seen and released. With the nature of projection being what it is, many of the dark thoughts and annoyances were projected directly onto David. And I was new to exposing private thoughts and still wanted to be a nice person. Now I had the added pressure of wanting to be a good spiritual person, a successful course student, and teacher of God. Admitting the ego thoughts in my mind continued to make me feel like a failure. I began to feel inspired at the thought of sharing my journal writing with the world. I had received such incredible support in practicing forgiveness through this process that I knew it wasn't for me alone. Every morning upon waking, I would move to the couch in readiness for my date with the Spirit. Whenever I had questions, I prayed to the Spirit, something I had been doing since I began studying the course. Sometimes I found myself speaking directly to Jesus, particularly in times of great intensity. He tended to use few words and give very direct instructions and reminders of the truth. With my course book and journal at hand, I turned inward in prayer to connect with the love of my life. It was the most precious thing in the world. I willingly opened my mind, desiring to share everything, to hide nothing, and to receive all that the Spirit and Jesus wanted me to know. I began by saying, "Good morning, Holy Spirit," within my mind, and then I would wait and listen with pen in hand, ready to write down whatever came. I would then feel moved to turn to a particular page in the course, or a question would arise within my mind. Often unresolved thoughts from the previous day would come, and I would begin by writing them down. It felt so safe, sitting in the quiet of the early morning, sharing my heart this way. And then the Spirit's response would begin flowing out through my pen onto the paper. Time and time again, I was shown that the attack thoughts that I was afraid to speak aloud were actually the gateway to forgiveness, deeper understanding, and love. I was receiving profound answers from the Spirit that were from far beyond my own realm of understanding. Occasionally, I would scribble out what I had just written, thinking that it made no sense at all. However, a few days later, I would come back and read what I had scribbled out, and find myself in tears at how deep, clear, and loving the message was. The channeling was a direct experience of God's love moving through me. It was a daily witness to the fact that God was real and that my faith in the unknown was justified. David often posted beautiful messages on his global mailing list, and he invited me to share my writings on it too. I felt a bit frightened at first. I was afraid of being judged and of being seen as unhealed. Beyond these thoughts, though, I could feel the inspiration of the Spirit's guidance to be completely transparent and share the depth of my experiences in a direct way. I realized that the fear was the ego's fear of being exposed and undone, which was all the more reason to go for it. Thank you for joining, everyone.